Hello, my name is Jasmine and I will be discussing the Zoot riots, prepared as part of the class Intro to Chicanx Latinx Histories at the Claremont Colleges. First, Eduardo Quevedo, on behalf of the Council for Latin American Youth, sent a telegram to President Franklin D. Roosevelt on June 7, 1943, 4 days after the Zoot riots began. In this telegram, Quevedo is asking for government intervention in the riots because of the chaos they had caused up to this point. His telegram provides us with an activist perspective of the racial tensions during these times. But what caused these riots? There are various layers to the riots, which may seem to be caused by one single event on the surface. The telegram mentions World War II and servicemen because in 1943, the United States was fighting in this war to defeat Nazi Germany. The war transformed the lives of Americans and cities. Specifically, Los Angeles became a center of wartime production with a diverse workforce. Since the war had caused a labor shortage in the U.S., many Mexicans migrated to work in agriculture under the Bracero program. The diversity of people in Los Angeles would be the first layer of tension that led to the riots. Who were the Zoot Suiters? They were Mexican youth who formed their own identity through their wardrobe. Their distinct way of dressing made them stand out from society and was the way they expressed their rejection to the cultural norm of Mexican assimilation. Men wore a zoot suit, a flamboyant long coat with baggy, pegged pants, a pork pie hat, a long keychain, and shoes with thick soles. Aside from the way they dressed, Zoot Suiters had a unique culture that adopted their own music and language, Calo. Some Zoot Suiters came to be known as Pachucos because they formed gangs and defended their turf, at times engaging in petty crimes and drug use. But mostly, they were a harmless source of sociability, security, and social identity. Even though the majority of Zoot Suiters did not partake in these gangs and their criminality, the media and society began to call them Pachucos. The Zoot Suiters' lack of assimilation into American culture made them outsiders to society, often viewed as criminals. The diverse population of Los Angeles created different neighborhoods based on race and social class. Chavez Ravine was occupied by working-class people who were mostly of Mexican origin but native to the U.S. Immigrants from Mexico, Italy, and Central Europe all resided in this neighborhood. Being a predominantly minority neighborhood of LA, racial tensions began to build when a naval training school was built there. Families of the Chavez Ravine placed importance in preserving their community, both physically and socially. This would lead to tensions between Zoot Suiters and sailors where insults were exchanged, at times resulting in physical altercations. The construction of the Naval Training School was another layer of tension that would lead to the Zoot Suit riots. The negative views of Zoot Suiters by the media, society, and police only heightened racial tensions. Since the 1920s, the Los Angeles Police Department began to target Mexican American youths because they were perceived as criminals. This view was also shared by the media at the time. For example, the Examiner and Herald Express depicted Mexicans as baby gangsters and Zoot Suit hoodlums. The police even worked with the media to push this narrative of Mexican youth by giving them stories to publish that would portray them as criminals. The media and police pushing a narrative of Zoot Suiters as criminals led to the wide social acceptance of this view. Quevedo's telegram offers a perspective from a minority activist who saw the media heighten the narrative that Zoot Suiters were criminals by attacking and disrespecting the sailors. While all these things contributed to the building tension between sailors and Zoot Suiters, many altercations occurred before the riots that escalated them. Months before the riots occurred, Zoot Suiters would block entrances to dance halls, theaters, and restaurants to prohibit sailors from entering. Also, before the spring of 1943, the vast majority of confrontations consisted of shouting matches across the street, but now they engaged in acts of aggression that brought them into face-to-face contact with the sailors. These recurring incidents of confrontation between sailors and Zoot Suiters was one of the main reasons the riots occurred. One specific incident that occurred on June 3, 1943, caused the building tension to explode. First, at around 6 p.m., 16 sailors were walking to the armory when they were confronted by two Zoot Suiters who shouted across the intersection of them, "Sons of bitches and bastards." The sailors shouted back, "Motherfuckers," but kept walking to the armory. Once the group of sailors arrived at the armory, another group of sailors was just arriving. This other group of sailors also had an encounter with Zoot Suiters where foul language and insults were exchanged. The sailors reported having seen the Zoot-Suiters do the Nazi salute and shout "Hail Hitler," which offended them because they were fighting against Nazi Germany in World War II. At 8 p.m., about 50 sailors stormed the downtown area with handmade weapons, searching for the Zoot-Suiters who did the Nazi salute. They went searching everywhere for them, in cafes, bars, and restaurants, until finding a 12 and 13-year-old boy wearing zoot suits in the theater. The sailors clubbed the boys, ripped off their clothes, and burned their clothing. This most likely had a profound psychological impact on them because zoot suiters were particularly sensitive to the power of clothes to create impressions. Riots continued for the following days until the Los Angeles Police Department declared the city out of bounds for servicemen on June 8th. Mexican youth were seen as the instigators of the event because of their association with crime, which led to the arrest of many of them, whereas only 2 servicemen were arrested. By the end of the riots, 94 civilians and 18 servicemen were treated for serious injuries. The Zoot Suit Riots telegram gives us a glimpse into the multiple layers that led to the riots from the perspective of community activists. The telegram mentions how the media escalated the riots by portraying the Zoot Suiters as instigators and criminals. The police also played a role in worsening the riots by not stopping the beating of Zoot Suiters by servicemen earlier, which is why Cavito may have sent the telegram for government intervention. Cavito's telegram also mentions how these riots could cause tension internationally because of war alliances. This sentiment proved to be true because the riots gained international attention, which increased the awareness of the treatment of Mexicans in the U.S. and left many Latin American countries unhappy with their treatment. Overall, Los Angeles in the early 1930s was a diverse and bustling place because of World War II. Racial tensions built because of the ongoing clashes of cultures and values, specifically between Mexican Americans and white Americans. However, the Zoot Suit Riots show how a false narrative of a group that is widely accepted by society can escalate very quickly in times of tension.